here and now. So we are now recording this webinar, so you can all have a copy of the recording along with any white papers or supporting material from today. So we will make sure that that is all available for you to share as well. Everyone has automatically been muted on arrival, so don't worry if you need to sneeze or cough or grab a drink. We shouldn't hear that. Just so everybody knows that. I'm really excited for today's webinar with Limeade and Stanley Black & Decker, where we're going to be learning how to unlock workplace innovation with employee engagement, well-being and inclusion. It is where I'm currently sat, 5 p.m. and it's just going dark. And I know that our wonderful colleagues over at Limeade, it's first thing in the morning there, it's 9 a.m. and Celeste, our lovely colleague over at Stanley Black & Decker, it is 12 noon. So we are joining you from all different corners and all different time zones today. So I am really excited for today, and mainly because we've got some incredible experts here on the line who are going to be doing all the sharing. So you're not going to be hearing too much from me. I will be here to help you out with any questions you've got. I will be monitoring questions throughout the Q&A and making sure that those questions are answered at the end of the webinar. But do wave your hand, enter into the chat or the Q&A and ask me if you've got any questions throughout. So I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Laura Hamill from Limeade and Celeste Bernard Columba from Stanley Black & Decker, who are going to be taking us through today's webinar. So over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Ruth. It's so great to be with everybody here today. I'm excited about our topic. We're going to dig into how do you unlock workplace innovation. Specifically, how do you think about how employee engagement, well-being, and inclusion create the conditions for your employees to be creative and innovative. So as Ruth said, I'm Dr. Laura Hamill. I work at Limeade. Limeade is an employee engagement platform technology company, and I am the Chief People Officer and the Chief Science Officer. So what's kind of cool about that is we study the topics of well-being and engagement and organizational culture, and then we also share that with our customers and just out in the industry. But I am also the Chief People Officer. So what's, I think, really important about that is we take those same ideas and apply them to our own employees here at Limeade. So I get to do both of those things in my day-to-day work. I'm really excited to introduce Celeste Bernard Columba. She is the Manager of Benefits, Communication, and Wellbeing at Stanley Black & Decker. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to start talking a little bit about the science behind these ideas, and then Celeste is going to really dig into what they do at Stanley Black & Decker. So I'm really excited that Celeste is here with us today. So let's jump in and let's give you a little bit of context. So I was just really curious about the topic of creativity and innovation for myself. So what I realized is that if I look back on my career, really my best ideas, my best work was when I had the chance to create something. Sometimes it was with other people, sometimes it was by myself, but really that's when I feel like the most important work happened in my career. And probably not coincidentally, also some of my most important career transitions happened at that time too. So I was really interested in this idea of if those were some of the best times, some of the best things happened to me in my career, how could I do more of that, right? How could I create the conditions so I could have more creativity and innovation? And what I was finding is that I was trying to, schedule creativity into my calendar. So next Thursday at 2:45 to 3:30, I'm going to be creative. And guess what? That just doesn't work. So I really started thinking, what do I have to do to create the conditions for that more creativity and innovation to happen? So that's why I was really curious about this. So how do I get more of that? So what we're going to talk about is what is creativity and what is innovation? How are those two related to each other, and why do we even care about them? How are they related to the topics of well-being, inclusion, and employee engagement? And then how can I be more creative and innovative? So what is creativity? think a lot of us know what it is. You sort of have a feel for it, but it really is the generation of ideas. So it's really the things that you create from scratch. They're original. What's also interesting is they sort of need to be useful. There has to be some reason why these ideas need to exist. So creativity is a really interesting topic. So some of you have probably heard of these ideas of kind of two different ways you can think about creativity. One of them is this idea of divergent thinking. So you start small and you get really big. And this is kind of the idea of being exploratory. So you start with a little tiny question and then you get really big. Another way to think about creativity is to start really big and get small. So this is when you might want to decide about something. So let me give you some examples. So convergent thinking, an example of that might be that you need to buy a car and you need to decide which car to buy. So you start really big with all the possibilities, but then you narrow down to one answer, one decision. Now divergent is very different. It's kind of the opposite of that. So what you could think of in this example is, do I even need a car at all, right? I could really question, maybe I should be doing other things with my transportation. Maybe I should think really outside the box around this concept of assuming I need a car. So that's just to give you a little bit of a feel. There's a lot of different ways to kind of come at this concept of creativity. So how is creativity related to innovation? So innovation really is, the start is this idea of creativity. So you have to have the generation of those new ideas. But innovation requires that you also implement those ideas. So it's generation and then implementation of ideas. Now what's interesting is there's a lot of different kinds of innovation. You could think about it in terms of this concept of radical innovation. I think that's where most people usually think about innovation. It's when you've got this huge, big new idea, and it's really different from what we've ever done before. So what's interesting about this is that it really requires new knowledge or a departure from existing knowledge. So very different from the way we do things now. Now, incremental innovation is a little bit different because it's just basically getting a little bit better on the things that we do now. So we meet the needs of existing customers or markets. So it's trying to solve the problems that your customers might have or something that's kind of right in front of you that you could do better. And so incremental innovation is really different from radical innovation. And what I see happening in lots of organizations is sometimes we're not really clear about which one we're doing. Are we completely departing from the way we've ever done things before? Or are we just kind of building and tweaking and modifying and getting better at what we do now? So I think it's pretty important to be clear about which one of those you're doing. And it's really hard to do both at the same time. So why do we care about this stuff? Why do we care about creativity and innovation? Well, first, many organizations absolutely are trying to grow. So if you think about your business strategy and your revenue goals, and you have growth in that, again, which many organizations do, well, almost by definition, you need to be supporting creativity and innovation in your organization. There's also the idea that there are so many industries, technology industries, many other industries that are changing so fast. So they're changing so fast. How do you keep up with that? Well, you absolutely have to have creativity and innovation as part of the norm in your organization. So there are a lot of good business reasons that we need creativity and innovation. But one of the things that I think is really cool is this idea that employees who are able to create and innovate just like their jobs better, they perform better, they get along with their coworkers better, they have less stress, and they feel more growth. So it's good for your employees to feel this concept of creativity and innovation. One of the things that I think is kind of funny, and I've had this happen to me before when I'll bring up this concept of creativity, people will say things like, well, I'm not artistic, or that's not part of my job, and that's one of the things that I really like to challenge. Really, every single job can have more creativity and more opportunity to innovate. And we really could think about, no matter what you do, what are those opportunities in your role to do things a little bit differently? It is really a basic human need to create things. And you could think about this in terms of we can all be creative in our own ways, in our own jobs. There's opportunity for this. I was thinking back on when did I have the most boring job that I've ever had, right? And so I was thinking about it, and it became really clear. I remember this example. I had a summer internship where I was doing job analysis in a manufacturing plant. They were manufacturing printers. And so I was asked to do these interviews. They were very repetitive. I couldn't deviate at all from the script, and I just had to sit there and take notes, and I did that day in and day out for a whole summer. And as I was probably a week in, I was thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle this whole summer? It's not very intellectually stimulating. And so what could I do? And I realized, you know, I don't know if I can change this thing that I'm working on. It's really important from a legal perspective that I follow the script. But I started noticing some things that people were bringing up, and one of the things that people were bringing up is this Kaizen approach that they had. And it was basically this idea of giving recognition or kudos to their coworkers. And I was really curious about what kind of a recognition people were giving. And so what I decided to do is just do a little project on the side to analyze those different recognition themes. And I just told my manager what I found, and he actually had me present to the VP of HR what those results were. So I just use as an example, sometimes our job and the stuff that we have to do is very, we can't deviate a lot from it, but I think most jobs have an opportunity to try something, to dig into something different, to make things a little bit better. And the feeling that you get when you get to do that is really a meaningful one. So I really challenge people, don't think about creativity as just being artistic, or that you don't work in the function that creates your product, or the typical function that you think of as being innovative. Really, all of us can have more creativity and innovation. Okay, so hopefully you're with me. You get this idea that this is pretty important, that creativity and innovation matter to organizations, and they can matter to us as human beings. Well, how do we do that? How do we create the conditions for more creativity and innovation? And what I argue is there are things related to well-being, inclusion, and employee engagement that need to be in place in order for us to have more creativity and innovation. So let's talk about that. So let's start with this concept of well-being. So well-being is really about feeling good and living with purpose. So how is well-being related to innovation? So what we can see through the research is that well-being fosters creativity, so it makes it easier to be creative. But when you're creative, you also have more well-being. So that relationship goes both ways. Let's dig into that a little bit. So first, this idea of well-being fostering creativity. So first, when you have more well-being in your life, you tend to have more resources to be creative. And what I mean by that is when you get a good night's sleep, when you feel like you have energy, when you feel positive and open and optimistic, you come to the table you're just more able to be creative. And there's also this idea of mindfulness. So mindfulness is an important construct that's statistically related to creativity. It's this idea that you can be present, you can see things, you can pay attention, you can be here now. And when that happens, you are more likely to have creativity versus when you're not mindful. There's also this idea that if you have too much stress and anxiety in your life, it's really hard to be creative. So let's talk about that. When you're stressed, there's some really interesting things that happen to you. First, you really get sort of this kind of funnel or tunnel vision. You very much narrow your attention to just the thing that's causing you stress or just the thing that's right in front of you. So you really have fewer emotional resources, cognitive resources to think bigger, to think about other things other than the stuff that's right in front of you. And you really have a diminished motivation to go above and beyond. So stress really limits us. It makes us kind of smaller in what we can attend to, when creativity and innovation kind of require in a lot of ways for us to think a little bit bigger and differently. So those ideas, those are just three of the ideas that we see in the research that show that well-being kind of creates the conditions for creativity. Now, also interesting is creativity helps you have a better life. It helps you have a higher quality of life. So there's some interesting research around how creativity can buffer against psychological disorders like anxiety and depression. There's also this idea that flow, which is an important part of creativity, can actually help improve well-being and help you have a higher quality of life. So the idea of flow is one I am just fascinated by. It's this concept that you get so immersed in your work, you're so connected with the work, that you're almost at one with the work. You don't even notice things that are going on around you. And that is some of the times when you can have the most creativity and innovation, is when you're in that flow state. And to me, I am so grateful that I get to feel that feeling. I've had conversations with people who've never felt that feeling before. And it's kind of a shame, because it feels so good, and it is when some of your best work can happen. And the research that I'm referring to here actually says that higher levels of flow in your life are statistically related to higher levels of happiness and quality of life. So flow can actually help you have more well-being. And more creativity. So one of the things that I thought this was a kind of an interesting quote. This is Albert Einstein was talking to his son, who was really interested in playing the piano and really digging into that. And so this is a quote from Albert Einstein. "That is the way to learn the most, that when you are doing something with such enjoyment that you don't notice that the time passes," Einstein wrote. "I am sometimes so wrapped up in my work that I forget about the noon meal." So I think it was kind of cool to hear, that Einstein talk about this idea of flow. And then finally, there's been some interesting research on just looking at this at the organizational level. So this was a study that talked about how they first identified organizations that were creative and innovative and compared them to organizations that weren't. And what they found in this research is that there were higher levels of employee well-being in those organizations that were more creative and innovative. So again, this relationship seems to go both ways. Well-being impacts innovation, and innovation impacts well-being. So now let's talk about this idea of inclusion. So inclusion is really an important piece to innovation, and I've heard these kinds of statistics before. So inclusion is this sense of belonging and connection and community at work that really can help you be a more innovative organization. What's interesting, though, is we have to also have diversity. So diversity and inclusion really go hand in hand. So what we see in the research is that if you start with a variety of experiences and skills, and you couple that with an environment that welcomes everybody's voices, that it invites, encourages, values all the voices, which is really inclusion, if you have both of those, you can have more innovation. Now, why would that be true? So what the research that we looked into really talks about is this idea of first having exposure to divergent or different perspectives. So when you have inclusion, you hear those different ways of thinking about things that really snap us out of our typical way of doing things, that help us question the status quo. Then trust. Trust is a really important part of this. And if your work environment is threatening, if you don't feel like the people who are around you or the organization have your best interest in mind, it's really hard to put yourself out there and say something that's a little bit different. So trust and feeling like, you have a work environment that supports you is a really important part of this. How in the world could you ever try something new, take a risk, really maybe even fail if trust isn't part of your organization? Then this idea of employee voice. Are there formal ways and just as important, informal ways for employees to be able to speak up, and not only speak up, but be listened to? So can I say, that's not working, I have a better way, why do we do it this way? It's so important that that is something that's easy in your organization if you really want innovation to happen. The last one here I thought was a pretty interesting thing, is this idea of how does communication across teams work? So what we find is that if there's strong levels of communication across teams, that's positively correlated with innovation. And in some ways that makes so much sense. How could an organization possibly create new things, put those new things into place, if we aren't working well together and if we aren't really clear what the other part of the organization is doing? And maybe even if we don't have empathy for the different roles in the organization and see things from the perspective of the different parts of the organization. So communication across teams is an important part of this. So finally, let's talk about the relationship between employee engagement and innovation. So employee engagement is a deep connection and sense of purpose you can have at work that leads to more energy and more commitment. And what the research really shows is that employee engagement is positively correlated with innovative work behavior. So why would that be? So first of all, you could think about this in terms of engaged employees tend to be able to be a little bit more flexible and adaptable. So what I mean by that is when you're engaged, you're mostly thinking about solving the problem in front of you, or you're so connected to your work that you're just deeply engrossed in it. So what that means is that you don't think about your job as just a set of things that are on your job description. You think about it broadly. So because of that, you're so into it, you really want to work across boundaries, work across issues, work across people, and so you tend to be more flexible and adaptive when you're engaged. People who are engaged also really think about work as a challenge and something that's exciting, and they're immersed in it. So when you feel like it's something that you kind of get to do and it's this big thing in front of you and you're excited about taking it on, that's such a different feeling than if you feel like, oh, this is something I have to do and I have to go deal with those people and go deal with all these problems. When you're engaged, you're thinking about things as possibilities and things that you get to do. So there's also this interesting idea of energy. So energy is really broken down into 3 different kinds. So when you're engaged at work, you just have more physical energy, and hopefully you can see the obvious connection with well-being in that too, right? Is you just work harder. And I always like to say it's not about number of hours worked, it's kind of the intensity of it too. So it's, do you really dig in? Do you really get to the heart of the matter, or do you keep it at the surface? It really requires this kind of physical energy to do it. Also, people who are engaged tend to have more cognitive energy to focus on those things that you could think of as more innovative. So they have the kind of ability to think about things that aren't just the pure tactical things that are right in front of them. And then finally, the last one, and the one that I like the most, is this idea of emotional connection. Do I have the emotional energy? Do I even care? So people who are engaged care deeply about their work. They really are connected to it. They see this as kind of part of who they are. And so when you think about it that way, you're kind of thinking about work all the time, and you're thinking about possibilities, and you're thinking about how things could be better and how you can move things forward. So that caring is such an important part of this. So just a couple statistics that I thought were really kind of important around this engagement and innovation piece. So this is some research by Gallup that said that 59% of engaged employees strongly agreed that their jobs bring out their most creative energy. But then if you look at actively disengaged employees, only 3% said that their jobs bring out their most creative energy. So this idea of creation seems to go kind of hand in hand with employee engagement. Now, this next concept was related, but just kind of a build on that. So in this, 61% of engaged employees strongly agree that they feed off the creativity of their colleagues. So not only is it just something that we feel as individuals, it's something that can almost feel contagious. So 9% of actively disengaged employees said they fed off the creativity of their colleagues. So I thought that was really a cool concept. So higher employee engagement not only increases the likelihood that employees will generate new ideas, but also that it'll sort of grow, it'll almost be viral in your organization. So what else works against innovation? There's a lot to this. And this first idea is this idea of when we're so deep in a functional area, when we know some topic so deeply, it's really easy to say, that's not how we do things, right? Because you just know the way. I definitely am a culprit of doing this. I care deeply about things like rating scales and stuff like that. So when people come to me and have different ways of thinking, it's really hard to break out of that. So I think that's a really important requirement. And so think about that in your organization when you have certain functions that are really deep functional experts. It's kind of hard in some cases to be innovative. Also, most organizations follow this idea of the Carnegie model of decision making, right? We have these calendars that we follow, we have this budget processes, we have limited resources, we only have so much time. It's really hard to think differently, to be creative and innovative when we're very bounded and very rational and very linear and how we approach things. Finally, I'd like to really point out this idea of if your organization actively works against creativity and innovation, it's just not going to happen. So if it's part of, if managers encourage it, if leaders encourage it, you're in such a better place. But in some organizations, there's really kind of a norm or so there's really a little bit more of a kind of expectation that we keep doing things the way we've always done things. So take a look and think about, does our organization actually support our employees to be creative and innovative? If a manager is confronted with an employee who came up with a new idea, what happens? Does that manager say, why did you do that? And we don't have time for that. Or was there an encouragement for that? And one of the really important parts of organizational support is this idea of culture. It's pretty, to me, pretty fascinating to look at the norms and values and beliefs of your organization and think about, honestly, how is that supporting innovation or not? I worked for a technology company that the culture was so strong in terms of people being competitive with each other. So we all had our own offices, and we all sat in those individual offices, and we closed our doors, and we didn't work together. It was very much how I, as an individual contributor, competed against my teammate and who came up with the best idea. So there really was a ton of competition from employee to employee. What was really interesting at the time is that we were working on collaboration software. So you could think about how misaligned our culture was from our business strategy. So if part of your business strategy is about innovation, you gotta look really closely on what happens in your culture. What are the norms and values and beliefs that happen in the employee base around these concepts of coming up with new ideas and putting those new ideas into place? So I'd like to challenge you all to think about some of these things. So these are some questions to ask yourself. So if you really want to have creativity and innovation in your organization, you need more well-being, you need more inclusion, and you need more employee engagement. So if you look at these questions and you can answer yes to most of them, you probably are in a pretty good spot. The conditions are probably good for you to have more creativity and innovation in your own life. Now, if you say no to most of these, it's going to be really hard for you to do it. So what I encourage you to do is just think about these 3 concepts for yourself and for your organization, and think about how you're really supporting this concept of innovation. So a couple tips. So some real practical things. A lot of the times I talk about things that are a little conceptual, maybe a little academic. Let's try to get a little practical with this stuff. So find some inspiration. If you want to have more creativity and innovation in your life, what if you try to mix up the space you work in and just even maybe work other places? Try a different place at home that you know, if you traditionally sit at the dining room table, what if you sat on the back deck? Try different things, mix up your space. Also, the people around you. One of the things I do for inspiration is reading, and I geek out on a good journal article, and I'm telling you, all kinds of good, cool stuff comes from that. But, you know, find your own version of things that you could read that could spur new ideas for you. And what we always encourage people to do here at Limeade is go outside, take a walk. It's amazing how fresh air and nature give you a whole different perspective on what you're doing. Clearing your mind. These crazy notifications that we have on our phones, turn them off. At least try it for a part of your day, and really let you have a little bit of peace of mind. This take care of yourself piece, I'm really under-emphasizing it here with this one little bullet, but it's a huge part of this. What I find in my own life is that if I'm exhausted, if I just have nothing left to give, there's really no way that I'm going to be able to be creative. So take care of yourself. Talk to a team member. And sometimes my team, when I get to talk to them about a topic, crazy things happen. The stuff that I never thought of comes up. And so that can be a really great way to be inspired. Make time. This is something that I really try to do is if I can't turn on, you know, creativity next Thursday from 2:30 to 3:15, how about if I made some more regular blocks, and those blocks were bigger that allowed me to even get into my topic. So really make some bigger blocks to schedule time to think and to plan and to read and be inspired, and just really find something that's meaningful to you. Dig into it, understand it more, and I think you'll find that it's pretty exciting, and it really helps improve the quality of your life too. So what's one thing you could do differently? I'm just going to take a second to pause there. So the things we just talked about, think about one thing you could do differently in your life to have more creativity and innovation. All right, I hope you came up with something really good and something you're going to start doing today. So a couple takeaways. So creativity and innovation really are pretty important. In fact, in some organizations, they're critical for success. What we know from the research is that well-being, inclusion, and employee engagement are all statistically related to innovation. And being creative, coming up with new ideas, having that time to do this is just kind of a basic human need. We all really should have more creativity in our life. And every job can be creative and innovative. Don't think about this as something that's just about being artistic. Don't think about it as that's not part of my job. Really, every job has the opportunity for more creation. So thank you for that. Now what I'd love to do is pass this on to Celeste Bernard-Galumba. Celeste?
Thank you. Yes, hello. Thank you, Laura. So I manage the U.S. Wellbeing Program at Stanley Black & Decker, and I'm really excited to share our story today. I'm hoping that you're able to take aspects of it and it'll help you as you create your company's well-being journey. So Stanley Black & Decker has a pretty cool history, and I just want to take a moment to talk about that. Stanley was founded in 1843, and Black & Decker was founded in 1910. And in 2009, the two merged to create the #1 tool company in the world. But we're a lot more than tools, as I'll get into in a moment. In 15 years, we've grown from a $2 billion company to a $13 billion company. And this year, we just celebrated our 175th anniversary. So I know this slide has a lot of information, so let me break it down for you. We are global. Again, I only am in charge of the U.S. employee base, but we have over 57,000 employees in over 60 countries. In the U.S., we have about 16,000 employees. As you can see by the center of the slide, our products are everywhere, and we're definitely more than just tools. And on the right, you can see our global brand support. And here you can also see our EcoSmart goal. We have a lot of goals. This is our corporate goal of reducing energy, waste, water, and carbon emissions by 20% by 2020, something that's really important to us. Infant protection, you probably see that in the lower right-hand corner and are wondering, well, what does that mean? It has to do with our healthcare division, and they make anklets for newborns, and that tracks where they are in the hospital. And then back to the upper left, we are about $13 billion in revenue now, but our CEO, Jim Loree, has set a goal of doubling our revenue by 2022. Now, we've made some progress since this was announced by a couple billion. That was announced about 2 years ago. So to help us get there, we're using our purpose, which is for those who make the world, to propel us forward in 3 key areas, the first of which resonates greatly with what Laura was talking about. We want to be the most innovative company, one of the most innovative companies in the world. And I'm not just talking in manufacturing, but in the world. So that's a pretty lofty goal. So innovation does play a key role at Stanley Black & Decker because we're never going to get to where we want to be by 2022 and beyond if we don't concentrate on it. So when Jim launched this purpose statement, for those who make the world, it really did become our why, our reason for being at Stanley Black & Decker, or as Jim puts it, our North Star. It wasn't one of those statements that, you know, kind of gets stuck at the top and never trickles down. It was, as you can see here in these pictures, passionately embraced by employees all over the world. Of course, that took a lot of work by internal communications, but I think it's a great testimony to how Stanley Black & Decker does truly care for employees. And we're making sure that everyone has a role in this company and feels that they have their own purpose and that it's transformed into something greater than all of us. So with that new purpose came a new set of values aligned to our purpose, and we are expected to live by these every day. The first is courage and innovation. We're bold to break the mold. That's to bravely innovate without boundaries, generate and embrace new ideas, drive cutting-edge digital solutions. Doesn't really sound like a manufacturing company, right? And to foster creativity for exponential growth. That's really important to us. Agility and performance is the next. We cut through challenges. We simplify things to accelerate business results. We anticipate, adapt to, and lead changes. And, you know, to borrow from what Laura said, I would say this is the kind of thinking that, you know, you don't do things the same way just because you always did them. The third is inclusivity and collaboration. Again, really important to us. We join forces for sustainability. We are to respect and leverage all aspects of diversity and make decisions with an inclusive global view to communicate to drive meaningful outcomes. And the last but not least is integrity and accountability. We are reliable to the core. We operate with the highest ethical standards, and my personal favorite in this category is to be who you are. Stanley Black & Decker really wants you to show up to work as yourself, which is very important to me, and I know to many of those people I work with. Also means to build trusted relationships, act with transparency and positive intent, and to live up to commitments and own the results. So all these values are referred to over and over in our communications, just like our purpose statement. They're not easily forgotten. They are definitely ingrained in our culture by now. So you may have guessed, Jim has been crucial in supporting our well-being program at Stanley Black & Decker. He was promoted in 2016, and the company has changed dramatically since then. You can feel it in the purpose-driven culture. In fact, one of the first things that changed and helped to create more change was introducing Workplace, which is basically Facebook for work. It's a product made by Facebook, and it's just for company use. here are some posts on the screen from it, and I'll speak to these more so when we get to the next slide specifically. But this workplace made our large global company feel like a smaller community. We no longer felt as siloed because we could see what everybody else was up to. We had a better feeling for the businesses, and we could share what we're doing. So it's been a really nice thing to have. Until this point, kind of a shifting gears here, back to our wellness program, we had an employee wellness program, and it was more so concentrated just on physical health. We had 1 or 2 steps challenges a year. We didn't really have that top-down leadership support. I should say this was before Jim. And we didn't really have a connection to corporate goals and our values. So we knew it was time to take it to the next level. So we did an RFP process, and we partnered with Limeade and relaunched Healthy for Life. So while this whole cultural shift was taking place at Stanley Black & Decker, I was launching a new well-being program. The timing really couldn't have been better. So before we launched, I had to pitch the program to Jim, which is pretty brand new for us. To that point, we didn't really talk to the CEO. So that was really neat. And the first thing he said, he got really excited about it. He said, why don't you come speak to my staff at an extended senior staff meeting down in Maryland. I'm located in Connecticut in the U.S. And he wanted me to talk to his direct reports. So this is the first for corporate benefits, so it was a really big deal. So I went down there, and I had 15 minutes to talk about the program and why we're doing it. And at the end, I had an ask for everybody in the room. I asked if they would all help support the program by sponsoring a challenge on the platform. And many enthusiastically did, probably because, Jim was so behind it, but that was great. And now they even come to me with ideas on challenges, so I don't even have to ask them. Now, when his 3 to 4 day meeting was over, the only thing he posted on Workplace was about my presentation. That was that post you saw on the prior slide. And that was further testimony of his support, and he also starred in our launch video, which is really cool. So we do call our well-being program Healthy for Life, so you see it everywhere. And as you can see, we really wanted to bring our culture into the platform. We use a lot of Stanley Black & Decker images on the platform and in our activities. We wanted this to look and feel like Stanley Black & Decker, not just another wellness program site. Even our incentive levels are named after our values and other Stanley Black & Decker buzzwords. So now the program really does feel like a true extension of our company's culture and values. So this is what I meant when I said we wanted to take our program to the next level. That's why we built our program on this foundation of whole person well-being. We replaced the word wellness in all our communications and even my title with the word well-being because it's so much more than just physical health. We use Limeade's challenge library, and we make sure we have a good balance of activities and challenges in all these 4 key areas of well-being. And we also supplement them with things that we care about as a company, like recycling and getting outdoors, which isn't just about physical health, but also doing good in the world, spending time with others, and as Laura said, fostering your creativity. So we concentrate a lot on emotional health because we know, I reside in the benefits department, so I know that from our claims data, our employees are stressed out. So we do try to do a lot of work in that area. So we also, once we had the leadership support, we wanted to get managers on board. So we wanted to give them tangible ways to support well-being within their teams. So we have them tagged on our platform so I can push out challenges just to them. And at first they started with more so education, like why well-being is important, why you are important to the well-being of your employees. And then we started following up with actions, like why don't you have one-on-ones? And, while you're at it, instead of just talking work, why don't you ask how your employees' well-being is? Not too touchy-feely or anything, people can't handle. But if we really want people to bring their whole selves to work and to be who they are, we have to treat them as they are and learn about who they are too. So one of our challenges of being a manufacturing company is that our not all of our employees are at desk jobs. Only about half of them are on company email. A lot of them are in factories, they're in distribution centers, so we try to make the program as easy as possible for them to participate in. And one of the ways is by having a well-being champion network. These are our feet on the ground of the program. Also, we have the manager support through the manager network I just spoke about, and we also push out to them talking points so that when they do have their one-on-ones or group huddles, they can quickly relay key facts of the program. We also have quite a few local activities that make a big program feel smaller and more personalized. Like we might have an activity that just goes to Stanley Oil and Gas, one of our divisions. And then, of course, we encourage them to use the Limeade app. So, that makes it a lot easier. And then we do many on-site screenings. We have over 205 locations in the United States, and about a third of them did on-site screenings this year. So by implementing all these features in our program, we've been able to increase our registration on the platform this year by 10%. So according to the Limeade Wellbeing Assessment, belief in company is off the charts, which is awesome, and you probably would guess that it's a lot due to Jim's efforts in our company and giving us the purpose. So we do try to use our program to continue to amplify this, and we continue to support Jim's emphasis on purpose. We integrate what we're doing in the company into the program as often as we can. So for instance, internal communications was collecting pictures of people at work for a 175th anniversary mosaic, and they were kind of having a hard time getting people to submit their pictures. So I said, hey, why don't I make it a challenge on the platform? We'll give people points for doing it. They got more pictures, and then also employees see, you know what, we really mean it. Like this well-being program is truly part of who we are at Stanley Black & Decker, and we do care. So it's really a win-win when we're able to do those kind of things. So diversity and inclusion, this is more evidence of our changing culture since Jim became CEO. Diversity and inclusion really has taken a front seat in our company. We have this growing network of employee affinity groups, as you can see here on the screen. And, these didn't exist a couple of years ago. So we also have a hand in creating this inclusive environment, too, because we create quarterly diversity and inclusion challenges on the platform. And we're really excited to begin a trial of Inclusion Plus, which is a Limeade product. And I'm not only excited because I won't always have to create the challenges anymore. They'll have a library related to diversity and inclusion challenges, but also it's going to give us more insight into what we should be offering in terms of challenges and activities and the kind of education we need to give to our employees to continue to empower them to embrace diversity and inclusion, because this is so important for everything, including innovation. So we are definitely feeling the success in our program on workplace and in our workplace locations. Here are some examples of what people are saying about it. They're excited, what they're getting out of it, they're feeling better, they're feeling more connected to the company, and we're just really excited to continue this momentum.
That is so great, Celeste. Thank you so much. I just love the way your values and business goals really show up in your program, and it's just pretty impressive what you're doing. I think I'm going to hand it over now to Ruth to see if there might be a few questions.
Hello. Well, Laura and Celeste, thank you so much. I'm feeling super inspired by that, and actually if I could have during the session I would have moved my location and gone and sat somewhere else, Laura, but I can't do that right now, but I've definitely taken some personal learnings as well. So thank you, and thank you to everyone who is still with us. We didn't actually lose anyone throughout the webinar, which is always a really good sign that people were highly engaged in the content as well. So thank you. So we do have a few questions actually. We had a question quite early on from a lady called Amy, and it was I'm just trying to Just trying to grab it. It was is one type of thinking. So Laura, this is probably for you about creative thinking. Is one type of thinking harder than the other? So this is on your slide around convergent and divergent thinking. Is one harder than the other?
No, I really don't think that is true, that one's harder than the other. I think the thing to take from that is being clear of what you're trying to do when you're thinking, right? I find that a lot of times at work, we can be really confused about, are we exploring options or are we trying to decide on something? And I think it's a lot of times ambiguous to our employees or a group of managers or leaders who are together what we're trying to do. And so I think even just thinking about them as different tools and tools that will work better in certain situations, and maybe even kind of announcing, this is something I want us to explore. So I want us to start, we're going to start small, but let's get really big and think about all the possibilities, if that's the kind of thing you want to happen in the room. Or the opposite, if you want a decision to be made, make sure you're really clear about that. We need to narrow down. We need to converge and come up with the answer at the end. So more think about it as, you know, there's different ways, and those are two primary ways. There's probably a lot of other combinations you could think of as well. But think about it more as just being clear for yourself. And when you're by yourself, what are you trying to do, right? Are you trying to think about all the possibilities, or are you trying to decide something? So I think it's just important to be clear what you're trying to do.
Thank you, Laura. I've also got a question here from Jamie. Can an idea be creative purely because it comes from a different perspective rather than it being a new idea?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's sort of the idea of being novel to the situation, right? So I feel like when I have another function, another group that I work with, when we bring these ideas of things that we traditionally do together, just because I, as a different function, have never thought about it that way, but I apply it to my world, that can be novel to me. So, for example, marketing. I do a lot of work with the marketing organization. There's a lot of really cool ideas our marketing team has. I've never thought before and never thought about how they apply to my people team or the institute. So I think it doesn't have to be a brand new idea. It's more novel to your situation.
Great, thank you. This is probably a question for both of you, actually. This is from Emily Stewart. Any ideas on how this could work in a smaller organization? Deploying an app may not always be possible in different setups. So how could this work in a smaller organization, maybe where an app isn't possible?
Celeste, do you want to take that?
Sure. So, you know, Limeade isn't only offered on the app, so it could be through a computer, and people do access it that way, or through a web browser, and they have their own app. So I guess that really depends on how large the organization is. So, I mean, if you're talking at least 100 employees, I think it's entirely possible getting people on board. And maybe you just start with a survey. I'm sorry. You know, just start with a survey and getting interest, you know, and seeing what people want.
That's great. One thing I would just add to that is you could see through Celeste's whole presentation that the connection between the business strategy and employees was the thing that I thought was really cool. So no matter what size of your organization, leaders could make a more explicit connection between what we're trying to do as a business and the role employees play, and how important it is that we care about them as human beings and that we really support them. So I think no matter what size your organization is, making that connection is so important. We call that strategic alignment. So I think there's a lot we can do at the leadership level. There's a lot of work you can do from a cultural perspective to make it really clear to your employees that you authentically care about them as people. And when you do that, you're going to get better business results.
Thank you. I'm gonna have to wrap this up shortly, but I will just go to one more question. I'm just conscious of timing and sticking to the hour. Sarah Livingston has said not only a massive thank you, and this has been really fantastic, but she's also asked a question. Any advice for working within very hierarchical organizational cultures, particularly ones that are resistant to new ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I would just throw in there, and I don't know if Celeste probably doesn't feel that that's the case at Stanley Black & Decker, but what I would say about hierarchical organizations is, what are the business problems that you have? And if you can really show your leadership that the things that you can do around caring about employees, supporting them, can impact those business results, then I think that's a good place to start. And I get it's really hard when you're hierarchical, but I think that making that connection to business results is the most important thing. And one of the things that, you know, if, for example, just to kind of build on that, turnover might be something that your organization cares about in a hierarchical organization. You can absolutely show the connection between well-being and engagement, inclusion, and turnover. So that's just an example. I really encourage you to do that. So kind of go to what, you know, some of the things you know they care about.
Thank you. So I'm just going to wrap it up now, and any follow-up questions we'll include in the and answers we'll include in the follow-up content and in the blog. So I'll just start by saying a massive thank you to Laura and the team at Limeade, who just starting your day over in Seattle. A huge thank you to Celeste and everyone there at Stanley Black & Decker, who are in Connecticut. And if you haven't already, I know it's lunchtime there for you. And here in the UK, I am going to finish work and put my son to bed. So it's great to be able to be together on this global webinar, to have learned so much over the last hour. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your opinions, your advice, and your story. So a huge thank you from me and from the team at the Employee Engagement Alliance and Employee Engagement Awards. A final reminder that if you are listening in the UK and Europe, the deadline is just a week away if anyone is wanting to get the recognition for being a top workplace. We will follow up with everybody who attended and registered for today with the recording of this webinar, together with any follow-up content and white papers. If you want to get in touch with any of the speakers, we can include the links. Is that okay, Laura and Celeste?
Sure.
We'll include a link, so if anyone wants to ask any questions directly, we will do that. So a massive thank you from me to you, Laura, and to you, Celeste, for this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Well, this morning, sorry.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, bye now, everybody.